What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've seen? In middle school we were asked to draw our homes for some assignment and hand it in at the end of class. A popular, extremely wealthy kid that sat behind me raised his hand and smugly asked the teacher for another sheet of paper because he couldn't draw it all on one page. His friends just snickered, but I was cringing. Even at 12 I remember thinking it was such a snobby thing to say. Worked with this kid who was a good kid, but completely disconnected from financial reality for most people. He'd just moved out west from another state and was trying to get on like a normal adult. He went to buy a new car and was shocked that they couldn't just bill his dad for it since they didn't know him. He ordered a bottle of wine at a restaurant and the sommelier said, "Certainly, sir." Then the sommelier whispered, "Just for your knowledge, sir, the bottle is $700. He looked straight at him and asked, "Is that a lot?" The sommelier honestly didn't know how to answer. Good kid, and he got a lot better, but he just didn't know. Once he casually told his mom he needed some help with bills and she deposited $20,000 into his account. I work for a dentist and her son is a spoiled brat. He was at the office one day because she had to bring him to an appointment later that day. He got bored and went out wandering around some of the local shops. He came back a little while later and without any preamble walked up to her and said, "Give me $80. She asked him what it was for and he just repeated himself and she gave it to him. Edit, did not expect this to blow up. I'll answer a few questions if I can. So the kid is 19 years old. He was 17 at the time of this incident. The father is in the picture but my boss, the dentist, is the main breadwinner and disciplinarian of the family. The husband is more like another child and just works here and there and lives off her money. She tries to act tough and instill certain morals and values in her kids, but then turns around and caves to all of their demands. For example, her twin daughters are going to university next year, and instead of staying in a dorm they demanded a 2-bedroom 2-bathroom apartment. They refused to share a bedroom or even a bathroom. At first she told them absolutely not, but they whined and complained and she caved. This will be a 2-bed 2-bath apartment in Toronto, by the way, where rent prices are through the roof. My boss is very much about appearances, and from a young age, got her kids accustomed to a privileged lifestyle. She created monsters. I worked at a Starbucks, and we hired a new guy, who I was training. At one point, I had to show him how to clean the restrooms. I grab the bleach, and hand him a pair of gloves, and he looks at me in disgust and says, "We don't have a maid to clean the bathrooms." He quit the next day, lol. So my best friend's wife teaches at a ritzy $40K per year private school, as in $40,000 a year for elementary and middle school. I think the HS is like $50K plus. Well, she teaches 7th or 8th grade, I can't remember, and she said she always goes around the class after the summer break and asks them what they did over the summer, and she particularly remembers one kid complaining about how much his summer sucked because he was stuck on his parents' yacht all summer and they didn't even take it to anywhere cool, just Italy. I wouldn't say rich kid, but definitely spoiled brat who thought he was rich. Befriended him in 5th grade over our interest in the UGR trading card game. First time I hung out at his place I noticed just how littered with stuff his room was. Some even unopened. I showed him some rare card that I had recently pulled from a pack. He got super jealous and angry that I wouldn't trade or sell it to him. He immediately got up and walked over to the family computer and booted up a site where you could buy cards and various other toys and such. Completely ignoring having me over, he's now on an online shopping spree adding stuff to the cart. After adding a few things he yells, "Where's the credit card?" And immediately his older sister comes running up the stairs to yell, "Kyle, mom said no more buying stuff online," and closes the website and shuts off the computer. Kyle then proceeds to have a crying tantrum on the floor, and I'm just standing there over him in shock at what's happening and how he's acting. I slowly stopped hanging out with him until completely avoiding him as his temperament got worse. Kid wasn't even rich either. If I remember correctly, both of his parents were cops. Friend got a theater with an arcade built over their family's 12-car garage. Parents didn't want the 5-year-old sister to be jealous, so they hired an architect to design and built her a fully functioning playhouse with a bathroom, a sea, and bedroom. Just the tip of the iceberg with this family though. Update. Lots of comments. I will try to round out the image. And for what it's worth, no, neither Ryan nor my family is rich. We just lived really close to the family and my dad and mother became close friends with them. They were on the whole really nice and innocent people drunken on the spoils of wealth. I can say I genuinely love the family. Firstly, one commenter was correct. This is not really rich kid syndrome. And no, these are not normal rich people. These are ultra rich, probably richer now than they were then. For example, George Bush Jr. visited the family's house to hold a fundraiser for his second campaign. This was not a typical rich family. Their father built a mini racetrack for his Lotus Esprit at his lake house. Also built a mega yacht with a garage for what most of us would consider a large boat on it. Surprise. He never really used it more than once or twice. An impulse purchase. The house, more aptly called a castle, was filled with game from African safaris taken in the 70s and 80s. The wife bought a popular fast food franchise unavailable in our area because she didn't like having to drive 30 minutes to get what she wanted. Once when I was swimming in the waterfall pool with the son, my mom called and reminded them I need to be home for some sports event or something, and we hopped in their Bentley dripping wet. It was the first time my feet ever touched a fur floor in a car soaking wet at that. At the Millennium, the father was into tattoos and regularly spent tens of thousands to fly the best tattoo artists in world and from Japan and LA to work on his Yakuza style sash tattoo. I could go on and on. But the number one thing that I think might qualify one in the family for rich kid syndrome is that the father, who inherited his family business from his father, sold the business overseas in the late 80s. The company was the only reason the town had to exist. Ever since, the community has been recognized as the most depressed in the state, and the schools unequivocally the worst. Luckily the only rich kids I knew were the most outstandingly well-behaved boys I've ever met. I was a youth leader in a ministry for middle schoolers, and I think the worst it ever got was them being mildly disruptive at times. But these kids had a literal half-sized basketball court in their basement, along with a basement the size of a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment, an arcade, a fully stocked second fridge. Don't even get me started on the house itself and the yard. This place easily would list at least as $1 million home. But they would share with all the kids in the group, and never ever look down on anyone for not having money like them. These boys even helped me change a flat tire on my car, because they felt it was useful to know how. They literally could probably afford a tow truck and a tire repair all in the same day, if it ever happened to them. They were so well grounded that it made me feel like I was the spoiled brat at times. Edit. Looked up the estimate of the house. It was between 1.4 to 1.9 million, but the next most expensive house I found in the area was listed for 1.4. The average home in this particular town costs between 400 to 500k, so it's still pretty lavish compared to what everyone else around them has. I could absolutely survive on my own. My parents just pay for my food and house, but I pay for everything else. If I got a job I could pay for my food and house too. Said at 18, in the middle of a discussion between two middle-class peers who were talking about saving money because they had to pay for their own college and living expenses. About 5 minutes prior to this conversation, both peers had ordered the cheap dinner options and declined a shopping trip later that night, while rich girl was talking non-stop about buying the best/most expensive souvenirs for her friends. Once tried working a regular person retail job and quit within a couple weeks as it just wasn't right and I didn't like it. Had actual responsibilities for the first time. Moved cross country for an 8-month education course where her parents pay food, rent, and school. They also gave her a debit card which replenishes up to $500 when it hits $50. She still posts Snapchats with captions of that broke person life over pictures of her getting Starbucks every day and insists she could survive on her own. Constantly suggests the most expensive options for meals, activities, etc. and tax on things like we can just split the bill. I know you're saving but it's just amount at least $50. You'll be fine, right? Then gets upset when people can't afford to spend time with her or when someone dares to suggest that she helps cover costs. This is pretty tame, but it's what I got. I used to work as an after-school babysitter for a loaded doctor couple with 2 kids. My job was mainly to pick up the younger kid from school and hang out till his parents got home. He was a good kid, but coddled and immature. He was in 5th or 6th grade at this point. Oftentimes he would not be at his classroom when I came to get him, and the school campus was huge. Different buildings, courtyards, playgrounds, the works. If he wasn't at his classroom I had to comb the whole campus, and he was rarely in the same place twice. He had a cell phone, but usually ignored its existence except for playing games on it in the car. The school was in the city, and I had to park on the street. A couple of times I wound up with parking tickets because, despite having stuffed the meter with enough quarters to presumably result in ample time, the search for my charge would take much longer than anticipated. After a point, I mentioned this to him, calmly asking that he respect my time and stay in a set location so that I don't end up with a $25 ticket again. He looked at me with a good-natured shrug and said, "Well, that's not much. You can afford that. Sonny, your parents paid me $140 a week, and I was in college. I know you live in a $1.4 million house and your dad buys you an expensive new toy every Sunday, but with the money they're forking over for your education someone ought to have taught you the value of a dollar by now." But honestly, he was a nice kid. They moved away, and I hope he's doing well. I worked as a bouncer at a high-end nightclub. The biggest boner of a rich kid, straight out of Malibu's Most Wanted, gets a VIP booth and bottle service, racks up a massive bill trying to act like a baller. His credit card gets denied, and he has to call his dad to come down at 1:30 AM because he can't order any more bottles. His dad comes down in his pajamas, obviously ashamed and furious at this douche of a kid, ends up embarrassing the shit out of his kid in front of his whole group of friends. He takes the kid's keys and is about to leave when his kid makes some shitty comment and goes back in the club. The dad's about to walk away after he apologizes for his son. When we offer to drag him out the rough way, he smiles and accepts. That kid hit every door and step on the way out. Not the best story, but was one of the most satisfying experiences working at that club. When I was a kid I got bullied a lot by this one kid named Miguel growing up. His family was a lot better off and spoiled him, buying him the latest shoes, starter jackets, video games, etc. He was always showing it off and especially liked to rub it into my face. My parents both worked 2 jobs to try and provide a decent life for me growing up, but money was tight. Most of my clothes I either got from the thrift store or they were hand-me-downs from my older cousins. I remember one day my parents decided to treat me and take me to the Nike outlet and get a pair of brand new sneakers. This was the first pair of shoes I had in a long time that were all mine and never worn by anyone else. I remember being so excited to wear them to school and walked into the classroom with a big smile that day. Miguel takes one look at my shoes and says, "Nice new old shoes. I had a pair of those last year when they were cool." With a few words he completely crushed the happiness high I was riding and brought me down instantly. Dunno if it qualifies as rich kid syndrome, but when I got out of the Navy I decided to use my GI Bill at one of the Penn State satellites. I was sitting in the cafeteria drinking coffee and typing up a paper when a girl sits down across from me and opens her backpack. She pulls out a sandwich bag and looks at it in disgust, then looks me dead in the eye and says, "I don't even know why I bother, my mother never cuts off the crust." I let out one of those high-pitched short laughs like, "Is this girl for real?" Oblivious to the tone of it, she says, "I know," right then asks me if I want it. I looked around thinking I was getting pranked or something cause this shit is too stereotypical to be real, and I just assumed I was being filmed. She shook it at me and gave me a well look. So I said freak it and took the sandwich. She then pulled out her student ID card and bought a crap ton of french fries. That sandwich was awesome. I think the bread was homemade and it was stacked like a dagwood. It had all kinds of expensive looking meats and Dijon mustard. Serious gourmet shit. I know this girl's mother will never see this, but I just wanna say someone appreciated that sandwich. This case isn't too bad, and it's a bit funny. I became friends with a kid whose family was really well off. He was a really nice bloke, but a bit sheltered, and university was the first time he really had any independence, but he had very little sense of what the value of a dollar really was, since his folks got him what he usually wanted, compared to what normal people would spend. There was one particular time he wanted us to eat at a restaurant, and he assured us it's really good. So we all rocked up to this place and the price for main courses started at $40 to $60, which as poor uni students we couldn't afford. But when he realized this he was so embarrassed he got his folks to pay for it. He's finally wised up a few years later once he got more independence away from his family and made his own money, and remains one of the best blokes I know. Like and subscribe for more Reddit videos.